Steven Seagal helps a lost boy at the airport, freezes when he sees the boy's mother. The airport was loud, crowded, and constantly moving. Rolling suitcases echoed across the polished floor, flight announcements blended into background noise, and travelers rushed in every direction, worried about boarding times and delays. Steven Seagal walked calmly through the terminal, dressed simply in a dark jacket and cap, avoiding attention. He wasn't here as a celebrity, just another traveler trying to catch a flight. His posture was relaxed, his eyes focused straight ahead. Then he heard it. A soft sound. Almost drowned out by the chaos. Crying. Steven slowed his steps and turned his head. Near a row of seats sat a small boy, no more than 6 years old, clutching a backpack nearly as big as him. Tears streamed down his face as he looked around desperately, scanning the crowd as if hoping someone familiar would suddenly appear. People walked past him. Some glanced briefly. Most didn't stop. Steven frowned. He hesitated for a moment, then walked toward the boy and crouched down so they were eye to eye. "Hey there," Steven said gently. "Are you okay?" The boy shook his head, wiping his face with his sleeve. "I can't find my mom." Steven's expression softened instantly. He looked around, searching for any frantic parent, but no one seemed to be looking for a child. "Did you get separated?" Steven asked calmly. The boy nodded. "She was right there, and then she was gone." Steven placed his hands on his knees and spoke slowly, carefully. "All right. Don't worry. You're not alone. We'll find her together." The boy sniffed, clearly scared but slightly comforted by Steven's steady voice. Nearby travelers began to notice. A woman whispered to her husband. A man slowed his walk. A few phones subtly lifted. Steven ignored them. He stood up and gently gestured toward an airport information desk. "Let's go talk to someone who can help, okay?" The boy hesitated, then nodded and took a step closer to Steven. As they walked through the terminal, Steven kept his pace slow, making sure the child didn't feel rushed or overwhelmed. Every few steps, he glanced down to reassure him. Neither of them knew it yet, but helping this lost boy was about to bring Steven face to face with a moment from his past he never expected to see again. And when he finally found the boy's mother, Steven Seagal would freeze in his tracks. Steven led the boy toward the airport information desk, careful not to walk too fast. The child's small hand clutched the strap of his backpack, his eyes darting nervously at every passing stranger. "You're doing great," Steven said softly. "What's your name?" "Ethan," the boy replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's a good name," Steven said with a faint smile. "I'm Steven. We're going to find your mom, Ethan. I promise." Ethan nodded, though fear still clouded his face. At the information desk, an attendant looked up, startled. "Is everything okay?" "This young man is lost," Steven explained calmly. "He got separated from his mother." The attendant immediately reached for a radio. "All right, sweetheart, don't worry. We'll help you." Ethan's grip tightened on his backpack. Steven noticed and gently placed himself between the boy and the crowd, creating a small sense of safety. "You're safe," he reassured him. "Nobody's going anywhere." An announcement echoed through the terminal, calling out for Ethan's mother by name. The boy listened intently, hope flickering in his eyes. Minutes passed. No one came. Ethan's lips began to tremble again. "What if she can't find me?" Steven knelt beside him. "Then we'll keep looking until she does." A security officer approached, glancing between Steven and the child. "Sir, is everything all right here?" Steven met his gaze calmly. "Yes. We're waiting for the boy's mother." The officer studied Steven for a moment, then nodded and stepped back, sensing no threat. Around them, travelers slowed their pace. Whispers spread. "Is that Steven Seagal? He's helping a kid." Steven ignored it all, focused only on Ethan. "What does your mom look like?" Steven asked. Ethan thought hard. "She has long dark hair, and she runs really fast when she's scared." Steven smiled slightly. "That sounds about right." Another announcement played. Still nothing. Ethan's eyes filled with tears again. "I shouldn't have let go of her hand." Steven placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "Hey, this isn't your fault. These places are big, and adults get lost too." The boy let out a small laugh through his tears. Steven stood and looked across the terminal, scanning faces, anxious travelers, rushing parents, tired workers. Somewhere in that crowd, a mother was likely panicking, searching for her son. Steven straightened his jacket. "All right, Ethan," he said gently. We're not waiting anymore. We're going to find her. Ethan nodded, a little braver now. As they stepped back into the moving crowd, Stephen had no idea that the woman he was about to meet wouldn't just be Ethan's mother. She would be someone from his own past, someone he never expected to see again. The airport felt even louder as Stephen and Ethan moved deeper into the terminal. Flight boards flashed rapidly, voices echoed from every direction, and the crowd seemed endless. For a moment, Ethan stopped walking and grabbed Stephen's sleeve. "What if she already left?" the boy whispered, panic creeping back into his voice. Stephen crouched beside him instantly. "Listen to me," he said firmly but kindly. "Your mom wouldn't leave without you. Parents don't do that. She's looking for you right now." Ethan nodded, though his eyes stayed locked on the crowd. They approached another security checkpoint, where officers were redirecting passengers. One of them raised a hand. "Sir, you can't go through here." Stephen stopped immediately. "This child is lost. We're trying to find his mother." The officer glanced at Ethan's street face and softened. "All right. Stay close." As they waited, a woman rushed past, calling a name that wasn't Ethan's. The boy flinched every time someone ran by, hoping, and fearing, it might be his mother. Stephen noticed the tension in the child's shoulders. "You're doing really well," he said quietly. "I'm proud of you." That small reassurance seemed to steady Ethan's breathing. Nearby, more people had begun to recognize Stephen. Phones came out. Whispers followed them. "Is that really him? He's helping a kid." Stephen ignored it, but the attention made security more alert. Another officer approached. "Sir, can I see some identification?" Stephen complied calmly. The officer studied it, then looked up with raised eyebrows. "Thank you for helping, sir." The words weren't loud, but people nearby heard them. The pressure in the air shifted. Ethan tugged Stephen's sleeve again. "Can you stay until we find her?" Stephen didn't hesitate. "I'm not going anywhere." Time stretched. Another announcement echoed through the terminal. Still no response. Ethan's face crumpled. What if she's scared? Stephen looked at him seriously. "Then we'll be strong for her." The boy nodded. At that moment, a wave of silence passed through the area, the kind that happens right before something important occurs. From the far end of the terminal, a woman's voice rang out, shaky and desperate. "Ethan?" The boy froze. Stephen straightened slowly, his eyes following the sound. People turned. Conversation stopped. The voice came again, louder now, filled with panic and hope. "Ethan." Ethan's face lit up. "That's my mom." Stephen felt a strange tightening in his chest, a feeling he couldn't explain. He looked toward the approaching figure. And the instant he saw her face, Seagal stopped moving. His breath caught. His expression changed. Because this wasn't just a worried mother running toward her lost child. It was someone Stephen never expected to see again. The woman pushed through the crowd, her eyes wild with fear, calling her son's name again and again. Tears streaked down her face as she scanned every corner of the terminal. "Ethan," she cried. The boy broke free from Stephen's side and ran toward her. "Mom?" She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him, holding him so tightly it was as if she feared he might disappear again. Her shoulders shook as she sobbed, pressing her face into his hair. "I'm so sorry," she whispered over and over. I looked away for 1 second. People around them exhaled in relief. Some wiped their eyes. Others lowered their phones, suddenly aware they were witnessing something deeply personal. Stephen stood a few steps back, giving them space. But he couldn't move. Because now he could see her clearly. Her hair was longer than he remembered, streaked slightly with gray. Her face carried the marks of time, exhaustion, strength, survival. Yet beneath it all, the same eyes stared back at him. Eyes he had once known very well. For a brief moment, she didn't notice him. Her entire world was wrapped around her son. Then she looked up. Her gaze passed over Stephen, and stopped. Her expression shifted instantly. Confusion. Recognition. Shock. Her lips parted, but no words came out. "Stephen?" she said softly, almost unsure if she was seeing a memory or reality. The noise of the airport faded. The crowd blurred. Stephen felt like the floor beneath him had vanished. He hadn't heard her voice in years. Not since a moment he had buried deep in his past, a moment he thought he'd never have to face again. "Yes," he said quietly. "It's me." She stood slowly, still holding Ethan's hand. Her eyes never left Stephen's face. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "After all this time." Ethan looked up at her, confused. Mom? You know him? She swallowed hard. Yes, sweetheart. Stephen stepped back slightly, unsure of his place now. I didn't mean to intrude, he said. He was lost. I just helped. She shook her head quickly. You didn't intrude. You protected him. Her voice cracked on the last word. Around them, whispers spread faster now, not about a celebrity, but about something deeper, something emotional. The past had just collided with the present. And whatever history stood between Stephen and this woman, it was about to be revealed. For a long moment, neither Stephen nor the woman spoke. The sounds of the airport slowly returned, footsteps, rolling luggage, distant announcements, but between them, time felt frozen. Ethan looked from his mother to Stephen, sensing something serious. Mom, how do you know him? She knelt beside her son and brushed his hair gently. He helped me once, she said carefully. A long time ago. Stephen lowered his eyes. Years earlier, in a different city, in a moment that had never made headlines, Stephen had intervened when this woman was in danger. She had been alone, frightened, with no one willing to help. Stephen had stepped in without cameras, without applause, and then disappeared from her life just as quietly. I never even got to thank you properly, she said, standing again. You saved me that night. Stephen shook his head. Anyone would have done the same. She gave a sad smile. No, they didn't. The truth hung heavy in the air. Ethan clutched her hand tighter. You saved Mommy? Stephen crouched down to his level. I just made sure she was safe. The boy studied him for a moment, then nodded with deep seriousness. Thank you. That simple sentence hit harder than any applause ever could. The woman took a shaky breath. After that night, my life changed. I left. I started over. I never thought I'd see you again. Stephen met her gaze. I always wondered what happened to you. She glanced at Ethan. This is what happened. Stephen's chest tightened. Not regret, understanding. Around them, a small circle of people had gathered, quietly listening, moved by the exchange. No one interrupted. You didn't have to help him, she said softly. You could have walked away. Stephen looked down at Ethan, then back at her. I couldn't. She nodded, tears forming again. You've always been that way. A long silence followed, filled with unspoken gratitude and unresolved history. Finally, Stephen took a step back. He's safe now. That's what matters. She hesitated, then reached out and gently squeezed his hand. Fate has strange ways of reminding us who we are. Stephen offered a small, respectful smile. Ethan tugged her sleeve. Mom, is he our friend? She looked at Stephen, waiting. Stephen nodded once. Yes. I think so. The airport announcements echoed again, calling passengers to their gates. The moment was ending. But its impact was only just beginning. The three of them stood quietly as the moment settled. Around them, the airport slowly returned to its rhythm, but something had shifted, something invisible yet powerful. A nearby traveler finally broke the silence. That was beautiful, she said softly. Others nodded in agreement. The woman took a deep breath and wiped her tears. I don't even know how to thank you, she said to Stephen. First for what you did back then, and now for helping my son. Stephen shook his head gently. You don't owe me anything. But I do, she insisted. Kindness like that doesn't come back by accident. Stephen looked at Ethan, who was now calmer, holding his mother's hand with quiet strength. Maybe some things happen so we can remember who we're supposed to be. She studied him carefully. You haven't changed, she said. Not where it counts. A security supervisor approached, having been briefed about the situation. Everything all right here? Yes, the woman replied. Thanks to him. The supervisor nodded respectfully toward Stephen. We appreciate you stepping in. Stephen acknowledged it with a simple nod. Nearby, someone whispered, Do you believe meetings like this are destiny? Another replied, I do now. Stephen overheard the words and felt their weight. He turned to the woman. Are you traveling far? She nodded. New city. New job. Fresh start. He smiled faintly. I hope it treats you well. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small card. In case we ever cross paths again. Stephen accepted it without looking, slipping it into his pocket. Take care of him, he said softly, nodding toward Ethan. She smiled through tears. I will. Ethan looked up at Stephen one last time. Are you a hero? Stephen crouched down and met his eyes. No, he said gently. I just didn't walk away. The boy thought about that, then smiled. I want to be like that. Stephen felt a tightness in his chest. As they began to walk away, Stephen stood still for a moment, watching them disappear into the crowd. Do you believe some people enter our lives exactly when they are needed most? Type destiny in the comments if you believe in moments like this. Stephen finally turned toward his gate. He hadn't expected this journey to remind him of his past, or his purpose. But sometimes, helping one lost child leads you back to a part of yourself you thought was gone forever. Stephen watched until the crowd swallowed them completely. Only then did he exhale, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The airport returned to its usual rhythm, announcements echoed, luggage rolled past, travelers hurried by, but something inside him had changed. He walked toward his gate slowly, lost in thought. He hadn't helped the boy because of who he was. He hadn't stayed because anyone was watching. He stayed because walking away would have been easier, and sometimes, the right thing is never the easy thing. Behind him, a quiet ripple was spreading. Someone had filmed everything. The video showed a tall man kneeling beside a crying child. It showed patience, calm, and protection in the middle of chaos. It showed a reunion between a mother and her son, and a moment of recognition that left everyone silent. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. Steven Seagal helps lost boy at airport. He didn't want attention, but he couldn't ignore a child in need. This is what real strength looks like. Millions watched. Millions shared. But what moved people most wasn't the reunion, it was Steven's response when asked about it later. A reporter caught up with him outside the terminal. Why did you stop? Steven paused before answering. Because someone needed help, he said simply. And I was there. That answer spread just as fast as the video. Comments poured in from around the world. He didn't make it about himself. This restored my faith in people. A small act, a lifetime impact. Meanwhile, Ethan held his mother's hand tighter than ever, replaying the day in his mind. He didn't remember the fear anymore, only the calm voice that told him he wasn't alone. That night, as they sat together in a quiet hotel room, Ethan asked, "Mom, do you think we were meant to meet him again?" She smiled softly. "I think we were meant to learn something." Across the city, Steven sat alone, staring at the card she had given him. He still hadn't looked at it. Some things didn't need to be reopened, they just needed to be acknowledged. He slipped the card back into his pocket and stood. The world would remember him as an action star. But one lost child would remember him as something far more important. Someone who stayed. You don't need fame to be powerful. You don't need strength to be brave. Sometimes, the smallest choice, to stop, to help, to care, becomes the moment that changes everything. Sparkles, if you believe one act of kindness can change a life, type kindness in the comments. Sparkles, subscribe for more emotional, inspiring stories like this. Because you never know when helping someone else might lead you back to the best part of yourself.